Hello friends, before I start telling the stories, please like the video, leave your comment, where are you from and what time are you watching? Also subscribe to the channel, this will really help the channel grow. Thank you all. Now, get comfortable and let's start. I went camping a lot growing up. My dad had me out in the woods before I even learned how to ride a bike. But the older I got, the less time I had. Work, bills, stress, all that normal adult garbage. It had been years since I'd been deep in the woods, actually alone with the trees and the quiet. So a few months ago, when life finally calmed down a bit, I decided to take a weekend and go back to the kind of solitude I used to crave. No friends, no phone service, no distractions, just a tent, a small fire, a sleeping bag, and whatever was left of my sanity. I drove 3 hours into a forest I hadn't visited since I was a teenager. It wasn't a marked campground, just an old place my dad used to take me. You parked off a narrow dirt road, hiked about 30 minutes to a clearing, and set up your tent right under the pines. When I got there, nostalgia hit hard. The air smelled like sap and cold dirt. The ground was soft with needles. The clearing was just how I remembered it, quiet, untouched, like the woods hadn't even noticed 20 years had passed. I set up my tent, made a fire, cooked a cheap meal from a can, and watched the sun go down between the trunks. Everything felt simple, peaceful, like I had stepped out of real life and into an old memory. Around midnight, I got tired and crawled into my tent. The night air was cold enough that it hurt to breathe a little, but the inside of the sleeping bag felt warm and safe. I zipped the tent door shut, turned off the lantern, and closed my eyes. Sleep came way quicker than I expected, until something woke me up. A voice, right outside the tent, not speaking, whispering my name. Matt. I sat up immediately. My heart slammed so hard I felt it in my throat. The voice was low, breathy, like someone was crouched inches away from the tent wall. But what scared me wasn't the sound, it was the location. The whisper was coming from the zipper, right from the exact line where the tent door sealed shut. I froze, listening. Matt. It wasn't my dad's voice, or a friend's. It sounded older, wrong, like someone trying to imitate a voice they'd only heard once. I didn't say anything, didn't breathe, didn't move. After a few seconds, the whisper returned, just a little louder. Matt, open the door. My mouth went dry. I wasn't about to unzip a tent for some stranger in the middle of the woods at 2 a.m. But the stranger didn't sound angry or confused. They didn't sound intoxicated or lost. They sounded patient, like they were waiting for me to cooperate. I grabbed the small hatchet I kept inside the tent and positioned myself silently. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but no matter who it was, I wasn't defenseless. Then the whisper came again, closer this time, almost brushing the thin fabric. Matt, why are you awake? Something about the tone made my stomach twist. It was trying to sound friendly, casual, like we knew each other. Like I should have been comfortable hearing my name said by a stranger with no flashlight, no footsteps, no breathing. I stayed still, waiting for the sound of movement, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, anything. But there was nothing, just silence so heavy it pressed on my ears. After maybe 2 minutes, I finally worked up the courage to reach toward the zipper and lightly tap it with the back of the hatchet. Silence. Then, the whisper returned, directly on the other side of where I touched. There you are. I jerked my hand back so hard I hit the side of the tent. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. The zipper never moved. Not once. No fingers, no hands, no attempt to get in. Just a whisper that hugged the fabric so closely, it felt like a mouth was pressed right against it. Let me in, Matt. It's cold. I finally snapped. Get the hell away from my tent, I yelled. The whisper stopped. The woods fell dead quiet. Then from several feet away, not at the zipper anymore, but deeper in the trees, I heard it again. Only now, the voice wasn't whispering, it was copying me. My exact tone, my exact shout. Get the hell away from my tent! I felt my blood turn to ice. The voice repeated it again, louder, like a recording being played through twisted speakers. Get the hell away from my tent! Then laughter. Not human laughter. It was too sharp, too broken. Like someone laughing who didn't understand the rhythm of laughter. The sound drifted farther into the forest, repeating pieces of my sentence in different pitches, like it was practicing. Get hell, tent, get hell. Then silence again. I sat in the dark, gripping the hatchet until my hand went numb. When the first bit of sunlight finally came, I crawled out slowly, terrified I'd see footprints or someone still standing in the tree line. But the ground was undisturbed. No prints, no mud, no sign anyone had ever been there. I packed up immediately and left. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 days after I got home, something happened that still makes my skin crawl. I was unpacking my gear in my living room when I realized my tent bag felt heavier than usual. I unzipped it and pulled everything out, and at the bottom was a single pine needle, black at the tip like it had been burnt, and wrapped around the middle was a thin strip of tent fabric torn from the inside wall. My tent had been intact when I packed it. There's no explanation for how a piece of it ended up torn off and hidden deep in the bag, except one. Something had reached into my tent. Something had touched the inside wall. Something had taken a piece with it. And whatever it was, it knew my name. It still whispered it sometimes. Late at night, right outside my window. Never loud, never clear. Always just soft enough that I can pretend it's the wind. Almost. I've gone camping dozens of times, but nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever messed with my head like what happened last fall. I wasn't deep in the wilderness, just a quiet state forest about an hour from home, a place families go for weekend trips, tons of trails, a big lake, well-kept campsites, safe, predictable. At least, that's what I always thought. It was late September, and the nights were starting to get cold. The leaves hadn't changed yet, but everything felt like it was right on the edge, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for October. I got to the campsite around 3 p.m. It was empty except for one couple in an RV at the far end, probably 200 yards away. I picked a spot under the trees, set up my little one-person tent, hung my lantern inside, and gathered some wood to get a fire going later. By the time the sun set, the temperature dropped fast. You could see the cold creeping in by the way the ground fog rolled between the pines. It wasn't thick fog, just a light haze that sat low and moved in slow waves, licking at the dirt like smoke. I cooked a simple dinner, listened to the wind working its way through the treetops, and after a while, it hit me how incredibly quiet the place was. No insects, no owls, not even the couple's RV door opening or closing, just stillness. Too much stillness. At around midnight, I crawled into my tent and zipped up. The inside felt warm and calm. I hung the lantern from the loop at the top, let it glow while I read a bit, then turned it off, leaving the campsite in total darkness except for the dim light of the moon. I fell asleep pretty quickly, and then something woke me up. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was that my tent was pitch black, like someone had thrown a blanket over it. I reached up instinctively for my lantern. It wasn't there. The little hook at the top of the tent was empty. I thought maybe it had fallen off, or maybe I had bumped it in my sleep, so I ran my hand along the tent floor to find it. Nothing. I sat up and felt around again, slow, deliberate, until I was absolutely sure. The lantern wasn't inside the tent. My stomach flipped. I unzipped the tent door just an inch to peek outside. That's when I saw it. My lantern was sitting on the ground about 30 feet away near the tree line, glowing, bright, perfectly still. There was no wind, no reason it should have moved, and even if it had fallen outside somehow, it couldn't have landed that far away. There were no footprints, no disturbed leaves, nothing showing anyone had come through. I watched it for a minute, convincing myself I had messed up. Maybe I left it outside earlier and forgot. But then it flickered, not like a dying battery, more like someone had passed a hand in front of it. Then it moved, just a little, an inch, then another inch. Then it slid slowly across the dirt in a straight line deeper toward the trees. I froze. I kept telling myself my eyes were playing tricks on me, the cold, the darkness, my imagination. But the lantern kept moving, deliberately, like someone was pulling it by the handle with a slow, careful hand. It stopped right at the edge of the tree line, sitting in a patch of fog. The glow lit up the first row of pines, but everything beyond was swallowed in darkness. I waited, watching, listening, and then I heard it, a light tap, like a finger tapping the metal frame of the lantern. Tap, 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 slow, even, rhythmic. Then a pause. Then another tap, this time louder, like someone wanted me to respond. I zipped the tent back up as quietly as I could and held my breath. I felt stupid hiding under a thin piece of fabric, but terror doesn't care about logic, it just controls you. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then I heard footsteps, soft ones, barefoot, coming closer, stepping through leaves, slow, measured. I could tell exactly where they were by the crunch of the leaves, first near the lantern, then at the grass, then just a few feet from my tent. They stopped right outside. I didn't breathe. The cold settled so heavily that condensation formed on the inside of the tent wall. The night felt thick around me like it was listening. That's when I heard breathing. Not human breathing. It was too slow, too deep, like something forcing air through lungs that were too big or too old. And then a finger dragged down the tent wall. I felt it trace the nylon, one long stroke, then another. Then it stopped at the zipper. My entire body locked up. The zipper didn't move, but whatever was outside pressed its face against the fabric. I could see the outline, a forehead, a nose, a mouth distorted through the material. It breathed again, slow, wet, shallow. Then the face turned, and the outline slid away, disappearing into the darkness. The footsteps retreated, slow and soft. When they were far enough away that I felt like I could breathe again, I peeked out of the tent. The lantern was gone. The fog was thicker. The trees looked darker. I waited until sunrise before leaving the tent again. When daylight finally hit the campsite, everything looked normal. No footprints, no disturbed soil, no signs that anyone or anything had been there, except one. My lantern was sitting on a stump about 20 feet behind my tent, perfectly upright, still turned on, and the battery, brand new the day before, was almost completely drained. I packed up and left without even eating breakfast. But here's the part that still messes with me. 3 days after I got home, I left my backpack on the floor of my bedroom. When I opened it to clean it out, my lantern was inside. Not the one from the campsite, a different one. An older one I lost 2 years ago on a completely different camping trip. It was sitting at the bottom of the bag, muddy, scratched, and still faintly smelling like pine. And next to it was a single wet footprint, small, bare, and facing outward, like something had stepped out of the bag. I threw the backpack away, but sometimes late at night, I'll see a faint glow outside my window. Not bright, just enough light to show me the lantern's outline, sitting in the dark, waiting for me to notice. I never believed in anything paranormal. Not ghosts, not creatures in the woods, not anything supernatural. I always assumed the scariest thing you could meet outdoors was another person. But that was before the camping trip last summer, the one that ended all 4 of our friendships without a single argument. We never talked again after that night. Not once. And I don't think any of us ever will. There were 4 of us, me, my cousin Tyler, and our 2 friends, Blake and Jordan. We'd been camping together since we were teenagers. Every summer without fail, same month, same lineup, same tradition. Last summer was supposed to be the final time before we all went our own ways. Jobs, marriages, moving, all that. So we wanted to make it special. We picked a forest none of us had ever been to before. A big one, with long trails and campsites spaced miles apart. Isolation was the whole point. Remote, quiet, untouched. That was our mistake. We hiked 4 miles from the parking lot to a campsite next to a small stream. The area was beautiful, tall pines, soft moss, clear water, almost too peaceful. No other campers for miles, no signs of recent use. We set up 2 tents, got a fire going, and cracked open a bottle Tyler brought for old times. We were laughing, talking about everything and nothing, when the woods went silent. And I mean completely silent. Not a breeze, not a bird, not an insect. Nothing. It felt like stepping into a soundproof room, like someone hit mute on the entire forest. I remember looking at Blake and seeing the exact moment he noticed it too. His smile dropped instantly. "What the hell?" he whispered. Then the screaming started. A single scream, high-pitched, far away at first, but unmistakably human. It came from deep in the trees, cutting through the silence like a knife. We all stood up, looking in the direction it came from. The scream continued, long and stretched out, shaking at the end like whoever it was couldn't get enough air. It didn't sound like an animal. It didn't sound like a prank. It sounded like someone in absolute agony. The scream finally died out, echoing into the trees. We waited, listening. Then it happened again. Only this time, it screamed my name. Ma! My stomach dropped so fast I felt sick. None of the others spoke. They all turned to stare at me. "Dude," Blake said, that sounded like... I know. I cut him off before he could finish. Tyler grabbed his flashlight. Someone's messing with us. But we were miles into the forest. No signs of anyone else. No tents, no gear. Nothing on the trail on the way in. None of it made sense. Then the scream came again. But this time, it screamed Jordan's name. "Jordan!" Only the voice, it wasn't the same as before. It sounded closer, and the tone had changed. It was still a scream, still sharp and broken, but there was something else under it. A kind of mocking distortion, like a laugh hiding behind the pain. Jordan backed up toward the fire, eyes wide. "That's not funny. Seriously, who the hell is doing that?" No one answered him because we all heard the next scream at the exact same time. "Tyler!" This one came from a different direction entirely. Then another. "Blake!" Another direction. Then again. "Matt! Tyler! Blake!" Over and over, the forest filled with a rotation of our names, each scream coming from a new place in the trees. 5 o'clock direction, then 9, then straight behind us, then somewhere impossibly high, like it was shouting from the treetops. The firelight flickered as the four of us pressed back toward each other. Every scream was slightly different. Some were too sharp, some too deep, some stretched too long, some were choked, some sounded like gurgling, some sounded like two voices overlapping. None of it sounded human anymore. Then the forest went silent again, and a whisper drifted from the left side of camp, a perfect imitation of my own voice. "Hey, over here." Every hair on my body stood up. It didn't sound like a recording. It didn't sound like an echo. It sounded like me, whispering calmly from about 20 feet out in the tree line. Then Blake heard his own voice behind him. "Blake, come here." Jordan heard his. Tyler heard his. It was calling to all of us, one by one, using our own tones, our own speech patterns, our own breath. "Jordan, this way." "Tyler, I'm right here." "Matt, hurry up." "Blake, help me." Soft, urgent, familiar. Tyler snapped first. He bolted toward the trees with the flashlight, screaming, "Who is there?" "Tyler, stop!" I yelled, but he didn't listen. He ran 5 steps into the dark before we lost sight of him. Then his flashlight beam jerked violently, then dropped, then flicked off. We heard Tyler scream, but not from where he ran. His scream came from behind us, from the opposite side of the campsite. Then another scream from somewhere else. Then another from somewhere higher up. Then another so close it sounded like he was right behind my ear. But they weren't all the same scream. Some were longer, some were shorter, some sounded confused, some terrified, some angry. The forest wasn't replaying Tyler's scream. It was inventing new ones, using his voice. Blake grabbed my arm. "We need to leave, now." But Jordan wasn't moving. He was staring into the trees, mouth hanging open. What is that?" We turned, and that's when we saw it. A shape, tall, wrong, standing just far enough away that the shadows hid the details. It had no color, just darkness shaped like something standing upright, something with 2 long arms, something holding its head at an unnatural tilt. But what froze me wasn't the shape, it was what we heard next. It spoke. In my voice. Perfectly. "Don't leave." Then it spoke again. Jordan's voice. "Stay with us." Then Blake's voice. "We're not done." Then Tyler's. "Come back." The thing stepped forward slightly, just enough for the firelight to catch part of its face. There were no eyes, no mouth, no features. Just smooth, pale skin stretched too tightly across a head that looked carved, not grown. Jordan broke first. He ran. Blake ran after him. I ran last. We sprinted through the woods in the dark, branches tearing at our clothes, our lungs burning. Behind us, we heard our own voices calling, laughing, screaming, crying, begging, mocking, all mixed together in a horrible chorus. We didn't stop running until we hit the trailhead. We didn't stop running after that either. We burst into the parking lot and collapsed behind my car. Tyler never showed up, but his voice did. It echoed from the tree line as we peeled out of the lot, calling our names, screaming, laughing, begging. We reported him missing. They never found a body. A month later, his parents received a voicemail. It was 3 seconds long, just breathing, and a single whisper in Tyler's voice. "Over here." But we all know, every one of us, that wasn't him. Whatever we heard in that forest learned our names, our voices, and our screams, and it's still using them. There are certain kinds of fear you can only experience in the woods. Not the jump scare type. Not the horror movie kind. I'm talking about that slow, sinking dread, the kind that builds when you realize you're being watched and the forest feels bigger than it should, like it's hiding something ancient and patient behind every tree. I didn't understand that kind of fear until last year. It was supposed to be a simple weekend camping trip. I'd been stressed from work, barely sleeping, and figured 2 nights alone in nature might actually help. I drove out to a small campground near the base of a ridge. Nothing extreme, nothing dangerous, just a quiet place with large pines and a few scattered campsites. When I arrived, I noticed right away how empty it was. No kids running around, no cars, no distant conversations, just silence. The ranger station near the entrance had a sign on the door, "Back soon, camp at your own risk." I thought it was odd, but didn't care enough to leave. I picked a site near the tree line, unpacked, pitched my tent, and started a small fire. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped, and the woods turned that deep shade of blue that almost looks like the world is holding its breath. That's when I noticed him. A man, standing between 2 trees, watching me. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, the way dusk distorts shapes. But when I squinted, I realized it wasn't a tree trunk. He was tall, very tall, thin, with arms that hung a little too long, wearing dark clothes I couldn't fully make out. He didn't move, didn't shift, didn't react when I lifted my head, just watched. I stared at him for maybe 10 seconds, unsure if I was imagining it. When I stood up, he stepped backward into the darkness and disappeared behind the trees. My heart started pounding. I tried to rationalize it. Probably a hiker. Maybe a ranger doing rounds. Maybe someone looking for another campsite. None of those explanations made me feel any better. I didn't sleep much that night. Every twig snap in the woods made me sit up, listening, but nothing else happened, and eventually exhaustion pulled me under. I woke up early, just before sunrise, and cautiously stepped outside. There were footprints, not boot prints, not hiking shoe prints, bare footprints. Large, wide, imprinted in the frost-covered ground. They stopped 8 feet from my tent. They weren't mine. I packed up a few things and moved back to the fire ring to get warm, trying to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hair on the back of my neck wouldn't lie down. It kept prickling like I was being watched from just out of sight. And then I saw him again, same spot as the night before, standing at the tree line, watching. Only this time the sun was rising. It wasn't dark enough to mistake him for a shadow. He was tall, maybe 6'5", maybe taller, wearing something that looked like dark pants and a jacket. His posture was wrong, his head tilted just slightly to the side like someone examining an insect. I blinked, and he stepped back into the trees again. Slow, soundless, deliberate. I froze. Then he appeared again, this time 10 feet farther down the tree line. Same posture, same tilt, watching. I tried calling out, "Hello, you need something?" He didn't answer, just slipped backward into the trees again, vanishing into the shadows. I grabbed my phone to call the ranger station. No signal. I walked toward my truck to leave, but something stopped me. On the hood of my truck was a small pile of rocks arranged in a perfect little triangle. I hadn't put that there. No animal had done that. Someone had approached my vehicle in the middle of the night while I slept, and I knew exactly who. I got in the truck, locked the doors, and considered driving away. But something stupid in me said I was overreacting, that I was tired, that it was probably just some weird loner. So I stayed. Worst mistake I've ever made. That night was cold. Colder than it should have been for late fall. I sat by the fire until it burned down to embers and crawled into my tent, determined to ignore every sound and get a few hours of sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the soft crunching of leaves outside, slow steps, deliberate steps, circling the tent. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped on the left side of the tent. Then I saw the silhouette, a tall shape, pressed right against the nylon, standing inches away. He didn't move, not a sound, just a dark, motionless outline. Then the silhouette leaned down. The fabric stretched slightly like a hand was tracing along the side of the tent wall. Then a finger, long, thin, pressed against the zipper from the outside, slowly dragging upward, not unzipping, just feeling it, testing it. I bit down so hard on my cheek I tasted blood. The finger stopped at the top of the zipper. Silence. Then a soft voice, male, but wrong, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. Gravelly, breathless. "Come outside." My blood went cold. I saw you. I couldn't make myself speak. You saw me too. I pressed myself as far back in the tent as I could, gripping my pocket knife like it would actually do something. His fingertips slid back down the zipper. Then the silhouette straightened and stepped back and back again and again until it was gone. I didn't sleep again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe right until the first hint of dawn. When sunlight finally touched the ground, I unzipped the tent and stepped out. There were footprints everywhere, circling the tent, leading to the truck, leading to the fire pit, leading to the edge of the woods, except there were no footprints leading away into the forest, just one long trail leading out of the trees. He hadn't left. He was still somewhere in the woods watching, waiting. I packed everything into the truck as fast as humanly possible and sped straight to the ranger station. The building was still empty, same sign on the door, back soon. But someone had added something new below it in messy handwriting. Do not camp near the tree line. I never reported it, never went back. But sometimes when I'm driving at night, I'll feel that same prickling on the back of my neck, the exact feeling from the campsite. And every so often, when I check my rearview mirror, I swear I see someone standing at the edge of the road, tall, still, watching, exactly like he did in those woods. I've camped in a lot of forests, but the one that changed everything for me was a place called Pine Hollow Reserve. It's not some deep wilderness or off-limits land, just a quiet, lightly used state forest that most people in my area don't even know exists. If you look it up, you'll find 2 trails, one old fire road, and a handful of primitive campsites. It's the sort of place you'd pick if you wanted silence without driving 4 hours into nowhere. I went there last spring to clear my head after a stressful breakup. I wanted a weekend alone. No phone service, no distractions, no reminders of anything except trees, firelight, and sleep. When I arrived, the parking lot was completely empty. There was a ranger station next to it, a small wooden building that probably hadn't been renovated since the 80s. The windows were dark, and a sign hung on the door. Station unmanned. Rangers on patrol. In case of emergency, remain at your campsite. Not exactly comforting, but I didn't think much of it. I hiked about a mile in, found an empty campsite tucked between some tall pines, and set up. The air smelled like cold dirt and rain, and the quiet was exactly what I needed until the sun went down. That's when the forest changed. Every sound I expected to hear, crickets, rustling branches, owls, disappeared completely, leaving the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I thought maybe a storm was coming, or maybe I was just not used to real quiet. Around 10 p.m., as I sat by the fire eating a cheap camp meal, I heard footsteps approaching. Not frantic, not rushing, just slow, steady steps on the dirt path that led to my site. I stood up, unsure whether to grab a flashlight or a knife. Before I could do either, a beam of yellowish light cut through the trees. A ranger stepped into view, or someone dressed like one. Tall, broad-shouldered, clean uniform, hat pulled low. He looked like the perfect image of an old-school forest ranger, down to the green jacket with patches and the thick leather boots. But something felt off the second he walked into my firelight. His face was wrong. Not disfigured, not monstrous, just expressionless, too smooth, too relaxed, like a mannequin's face given the ability to blink. He nodded once, evening. His voice was flat, low, no cadence, no natural tone. It sounded like someone reading a line they had practiced, not spoken. Evening, I said. Didn't expect patrols this late. We patrol, he said simply. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. He just stood there, shifting slightly like he was adjusting to the firelight. His eyes didn't reflect the flame. I don't know why I noticed that. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but it did. There are rules, he said after a long silence. You should follow them. What rules? I asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me with a stiff, mechanical motion. The paper was old, yellowed, slightly damp. The rules were typed out. Pine Hollow Reserve, Night Safety Protocol. Do not leave your tent between 3 a.m. and 3:31 a.m. If you hear knocking on a tree, do not respond. If you hear footsteps circling your campsite, remain still. If approached by someone claiming to be a ranger, ask for their name. If they do not answer, do not follow them. If you wake up to your fire still burning, do not look directly at it. If you feel watched, you are. Stay inside your tent until sunrise. I looked up from the paper. Is this? But he was gone. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. The path was empty. The woods were silent. I didn't sleep much that night. The rules freaked me out more than I wanted to admit. By 2:45 a.m., I was lying in my sleeping bag, staring at my watch, waiting for 3 to hit. At exactly 3:04 a.m., footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling my tent. I froze. I remembered the paper. If you hear footsteps circling your campsite, remain still. So I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The footsteps moved closer, then right beside the tent wall. Something brushed the nylon, something tall, something human-shaped. Then knock, a single hard knock against a tree. Then another, steady, in a pattern. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop myself from yelling. The knocks grew louder, more aggressive, like they were trying to get a reaction. Then, silence. No knocking, no footsteps, no breathing, just dead stillness. At 3:31 a.m., it stopped. All at once. I didn't move again until sunrise, not even to reach for my flashlight. When daylight finally crept to the tent, I crawled out and scanned the campsite. There were footprints, large ones, deep ones, circling the tent perfectly. Some were so close they touched the fabric. But the weirdest part? There were 2 sets of prints, one barefoot, one in heavy boots. The barefoot ones circled multiple times. The boot prints, just one path, straight to the tree line, and stopping. I packed everything and started hiking out immediately. I didn't even eat. Halfway back to the parking lot, I heard rustling to my right. When I turned, the ranger was standing behind a fallen log about 30 feet away, watching. Same uniform, same hat, same blank expression. I forced myself to call out, "What's your name?" He didn't answer, just stared. So I called again, louder. "What's your name?" He didn't move, but he smiled, barely. A tiny curl of the lips that didn't reach the eyes. Then he turned slowly and walked deeper into the woods. Not down the trail, not toward the station, just straight into the trees. The wind picked up and blew pine needles across the path. When I got back to the parking lot, another car had arrived. A real ranger stood near it talking to someone. He was older, heavy-set, wearing a modern uniform, nothing like the one I'd seen. I approached him. "Hey, I think I met one of your guys last night. Tall, older uniform, didn't say his name. Gave me these rules." The ranger's face changed instantly. Real fear. He took a slow breath, then said, "There are no night patrols in this forest." My mouth went dry. "And no ranger wears an older uniform," he added. "Those were phased out 15 years ago." I showed him the paper. He didn't take it, just stared at it like it was radioactive. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "And don't come back here alone, ever." That was a year ago. I still have the paper. I've tried to throw it away 3 times. Each time it ends up back in my camping gear, folded, damp, with a new line written at the bottom in faint pencil. Rule 8, don't look for me. I've always trusted trails. They're predictable, human-made, marked, controlled. No matter where you are in the woods, a trail is supposed to be the one thing that makes sense. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, usually leading right back to where you started. But last summer proved something to me. Trails can lie, and sometimes they don't lead you back at all. It was July when it happened. A brutally hot weekend, hotter than any I could remember. I decided to go hiking early in the morning to avoid the worst of the heat. The trail I picked was a simple 3-mile loop in a small state forest 2 towns over. Nothing dangerous, nothing intense. A trail families walked every week. When I pulled into the gravel parking lot, only one other car was there, a faded blue sedan with peeling paint. A man sat inside with his head leaned back, eyes closed like he was sleeping. I figured he was resting after a hike. I locked my car, strapped on my pack, and stepped onto the loop. The first mile was easy. Flat dirt path under tall trees, sunlight trickling through like gold dust. Birds chirped, insects hummed, and everything felt normal, peaceful. Around the second mile, something strange happened. The forest went quiet, not gradually, instantly, like someone turned off a switch. I slowed down, waiting for the noise to come back. Sometimes forests get quiet when a predator is nearby. But this wasn't that kind of quiet. This wasn't natural. This was hollow, dead, still. I kept walking, trying not to let the silence get in my head. The trail markers were nailed to trees every few hundred feet, bright blue rectangles. I counted them to calm my nerves. One marker, then two, then three, then four, then the same marker again. At first I didn't notice, but after the ninth blue rectangle, I realized something. Each one was nailed into the exact same kind of tree, same height, same knot, same crack running vertically. I stopped, turned around and looked back. Tree knots don't repeat perfectly. Nature doesn't copy and paste. This was the same tree, the same marker, the same place. I shrugged it off as my mind playing tricks, but with each step forward I felt something cold twist in my stomach. 5 minutes later I saw it again. The same tree, same knot, same marker. I walked faster, then faster, almost jogging. My breathing got loud and shaky, echoing too much in the dead silence. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. My own boot print. Not a fresh one, not one that made sense on a loop trail. It was old, edges dried, already filled with dust. But I recognized the pattern. My tread was distinctive, with a chunk missing near the heel. I crouched down and touched it. It was mine, and it wasn't the only one. Boot prints, my boot prints, scattered the dirt ahead of me like someone had been walking the same stretch of trail over and over. My stomach dropped. I stood up slowly and looked around. Same trees, same rocks, same sun pattern through the branches. I kept moving, almost running now. I didn't care about the loop anymore. I just wanted out. 10 minutes later, my throat dry and my shirt hanging heavy with sweat, I saw it. A fork in the trail. Two paths, left and right. I didn't remember a fork on the map. The trail was supposed to be one continuous loop, but I didn't care. I just took the right path, desperate for anything that felt different. The second I stepped onto it, the forest changed. The temperature dropped, the shade thickened, the smell of damp earth grew stronger. It felt like stepping into a different world. I walked for maybe 200 feet when I saw something that made my heart slam against my ribs. A backpack, old, torn, covered in dirt, just sitting in the middle of the trail. I approached slowly. Every instinct told me to turn around, but curiosity won. I nudged it with my boot. It collapsed like it had been abandoned for years. Inside was a crushed metal water bottle, a faded map, and something else, a photo. A photo of a woman hiking, smiling, holding up her fingers in a peace sign, standing next to a blue trail marker. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, I can't find the end. I dropped the photo like it burned. My pulse hammered in my ears. Something was very, very wrong with this trail. I forced myself to keep going, but every step felt heavier, like the air itself was pushing against me. My vision blurred at the edges. My head pounded. I felt watched from every angle, like the trees themselves were leaning in. Finally, the brush thinned and I stumbled into a clearing, a large circular patch of dirt with nothing in it except a single tree in the center. A blue marker nailed to its trunk. I almost screamed. It was the same tree, the same marker, the same knot, the same crack, the same place I had passed at least 10 times. Except this time, there was something new, a man, standing at the far side of the clearing, facing the tree, back turned to me, completely still. I froze. It was the man from the blue sedan, same clothes, same posture, but something was wrong. His head tilted too far to the side, unnaturally, painfully, like his neck was made of paper. His arms hung stiff. His legs were muddy up to the knees. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking. He didn't react, didn't move, didn't turn. I took one step forward. The man exhaled, a long, broken, wheezing breath that didn't sound human, more like something imitating breathing. Then in a voice that made my bones vibrate, he whispered, "You won't find the end either." He didn't turn around. He didn't shift. He just vanished. Not in a puff of smoke. Not into the trees. He simply wasn't there anymore. One blink, gone. The clearing felt like it was closing in, and I took off running. Branches tore at my arms and face, the trees passing in a blur of brown and green. My vision tunneled. My lungs burned. My boots pounded the ground in desperate, animal panic. Then, suddenly, I burst out of the trail and stumbled into the parking lot. Sunlight hit me like a punch. The blue sedan was still there, but the driver's door was open. I walked toward it slowly, shaking. Inside the car, on the passenger seat, was a note. "If you leave the trail, don't look behind you." There were deep mud stains on the driver's seat, bare footprints on the ground beside the door. I didn't look behind me, not once. I got in my car, locked the doors, floored the gas, and didn't stop until I was miles away. I haven't hiked alone since. But sometimes when I wake up at night, gasping and covered in sweat, I hear a faint whisper in my head. You didn't finish the loop. And I know, somewhere in those woods, the trail is still waiting for me. I've built thousands of campfires in my life. I know exactly how they behave, how long different woods burn, how long embers stay warm, how much water it takes to kill the flame. Fires are simple, predictable. Tools, nothing more. So what happened last October shouldn't have been possible. I went camping alone at a remote site deep inside a national forest. No service, no nearby campers. The ranger station was 12 miles away. It was supposed to be a weekend trip, 2 nights. Just me, a fire, and some quiet before winter shut everything down. I arrived late Friday afternoon and set up camp at a clearing near a small creek. I gathered a pile of dry logs, chopped a few branch pieces, and built a fire the way I always do. Tight, controlled, perfect. The flame lit immediately. Normal, ordinary. But as the sun went down and the forest sank into darkness, I noticed something strange. The fire didn't flicker, not even in the wind. Flames are supposed to move with the breeze, dance, shift, spark. But this one stood completely still, like someone had paused it in motion. The flames rose straight upward, perfectly vertical, not bending or trembling even when gusts of cold wind blew through the clearing. I stepped closer. The heat felt wrong. Not warm, not comforting, sharp. Like standing too close to an open oven, intense, pressure-like, almost metallic. I backed away, trying to shake off the discomfort. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the air was unusually still. I forced myself not to think too much about it. I ate a small dinner, sat by the fire, and eventually crawled into my tent for the night. At 3:14 a.m., I woke up burning hot. Sweat drenched my shirt. The air inside the tent felt like a sauna. My skin tingled painfully, like I had fallen asleep under a heat lamp. I unzipped the tent. The fire was raging, not crackling, not roaring, just burning, completely silent. Flames reaching 6 feet high. Blue flames. Fire doesn't burn blue unless chemicals are involved. I hadn't used any accelerant, nothing except wood from the forest floor. My heart pounded. Something was very, very wrong. I grabbed my water jug, full, heavy, and dumped it directly on the fire. The water hissed violently, but the flames didn't go out. They didn't even shrink. I grabbed more water. More. 3 full jugs, 10 gallons. The fire didn't react to any of it. The flames stayed tall and motionless, like they weren't connected to the wood at all, just hovering above it. I stepped back, shaking. Then the fire changed. The blue shifted, faded, and turned black. Not dark, not smoky. Black flame, impossible flame. Flame that didn't give off light, only shadows. The clearing around me darkened even though the fire was still burning. The shadows stretched outward like veins crawling across the dirt, reaching for my boots. My breath caught. Something was moving inside the flames. A shape, like a person curled up in the coals, arm, shoulder, bent legs, head turned upward toward me. I stumbled back, heart slamming so hard I thought I would faint. The shape moved, just a twitch, but real, not illusion, not smoke patterns, not imagination. A twitch of a hand, a curl of fingers, a small shift in the flame-made silhouette. Then a voice, low, crackling, dry, like it was speaking through burned lungs. Too late. My stomach dropped. The thing inside the fire sat up, slow, stiff, unnatural. Its head tilted, neck bending too far, like the bones inside were softened. The black flames licked around it but didn't burn it. They clung to it like living shadows. I backed toward the tent, reaching blindly for anything, knife, flashlight, anything. The shape in the fire spoke again. You lit it. My skin crawled. Now you keep it. I grabbed dirt in my shaking hands and threw it on the fire. Shovelfuls, handfuls, anything. But the flames didn't stop. The dirt passed through them as if the fire wasn't really there at all. Then the temperature dropped, fast. The air went from burning hot to freezing cold in seconds. Frost formed along the edges of my tent. My breath came out in visible puffs. The shadows cast by the black fire reached the tree line, then began climbing the trunks. One by one, the trees shifted into silhouette, absorbed by the creeping darkness. I ran. Not a smart run, not a planned run, just blind panic. I sprinted down the trail, branches whipping my face, roots catching my boots. The cold made my lungs feel like they were tearing apart. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if anything was following me. I reached the trailhead just as sunrise touched the sky. The forest behind me hissed with a low rumbling sound. the same sound as wet logs burning in a campfire. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before getting the door open. I drove straight to the ranger station. A man in uniform stepped out and saw the terror on my face. "What happened?" he asked. I tried to explain, stumbling over my words, that my fire wouldn't go out, that something moved inside the flames, that the woods went dark. The ranger nodded slowly. "You were at campsite 4, he said quietly. My stomach tightened. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked inside, returned with a thick, dusty binder and flipped it open. Page after page of reports, old ones, new ones, dozens. Each one describing a fire at campsite 4 that wouldn't go out, some glowing blue, some burning black, some making shapes, some speaking. He closed the binder. "You're lucky," he said. I stared at him. "Lucky? What the hell are you talking about?" He pointed at the horizon behind me. "Your fire went out." I turned slowly. In the distance, far, far back where my campsite had been, the sky glowed faintly, like an ember refusing to die. The ranger lowered his voice. "If it's still burning tomorrow, don't go back, no matter what you hear." "What I hear?" I whispered. He didn't look at me when he answered. "Because if it wants you back, it will call your name." I don't really talk about this story. Even saying it out loud makes me feel sick. There's something deeply wrong about what I saw, and retelling it feels like inviting it back. But every time I try to forget, I hear those sounds again. The dragging hands, the labored breathing, the scraping circling my tent. This happened 3 summers ago, before my son was born. Back when I used to camp alone on weekends just to clear my head from work stress. I'd visit random state forests or primitive sites and stay a night or two. I never worried about safety. Never thought twice about being alone miles from anyone. This trip changed that permanently. It was late August. I drove up to a quiet forest in the northern part of the state, a place mostly used for hunting and fishing. The campsite I picked wasn't even an official site, just a clearing near a small ridge, big enough for a tent and fire pit with flat ground. As soon as I arrived, I felt something off. Not a bad feeling, just watched. Like the forest was aware of me. The trees were tall and old, with thick bark and low, sprawling branches. The canopy was dense enough that the sunlight came through in thin columns. The air was still and heavy, not even a breeze. But I ignored the feeling. I set up the tent, gathered wood, and built a fire. By dusk, it was just me, the crackling flames, and the woods turning darker by the second. The usual forest sounds, chirping, rustling, insects, faded slower than normal, tapering off until the night was strangely quiet. At around 11:30 p.m., I put the fire out completely, crawled into my tent, zipped the door, and tried to get some sleep. I don't know how long I slept before something woke me. Not a loud sound, not a scream, not footsteps. Just a soft, slow, rhythmic drag across the ground. Shh, thump, thump, over and over. It wasn't walking. It wasn't crawling. It was dragging. Something large was dragging itself across the forest floor, using its hands. The sound came from the ridge behind my tent. Each drag was followed by a dull impact, like a palm slapping dirt, slow, heavy, unsteady, almost like it was struggling to pull its weight. My whole body froze. Shh, thump. Then it got closer. I turned off my breathing. My heartbeat pounded so loud I swore it could hear it. I waited for the sound to fade or turn away, but instead, it came right toward my campsite. Shh, thump, thump. It stopped behind my tent. Silence. Then a low, strained, wet inhale, like lungs pulling in air they didn't know how to use. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Then it exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that sounded pained, broken, like something trying to breathe through a destroyed throat. My tent wall shifted inward slightly, just barely denting around the shape of something long, thin, bony. A finger. A single finger slowly tracing across the nylon. I bit down on my hand so hard I tasted blood. The finger moved along the wall, dragging from one side to the other, searching, feeling. Then the dragging hand started again. But this time, it wasn't moving in a straight line. It was circling the tent. Thump, thump, thump. Every drag was slow, methodical, like someone walking around me on their hands, pulling their entire body weight with each swing of their arms. I could hear the hands digging into the dirt, hear their weight pressing heavily into the ground, hear their breath growing louder as it completed the circle. Then it stopped again, this time at the front of the tent near the door. Something pressed against the zipper from the outside. Not a hand. A face. I could see the outline, long head, jaw jutting forward a little, one side slightly warped like it had been smashed once and never healed right. The breathing got louder, wetter, more strained. I couldn't move, couldn't think, could barely stay conscious. The creature inhaled again, louder than before. Then in a voice that didn't sound like a voice at all, more like air forcing through shattered vocal cords, it whispered, "Open." My entire body locked. Open. It scratched lightly at the zipper. Open. I clenched the knife in my hand, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. The creature shifted, dragging itself slightly, changing position. I heard the heavy weight of it pressing into the dirt as it moved, heard its hands digging deep lines into the soil. Then it did something that made my blood freeze. It stood up. Not fully. Not naturally. The sound wasn't normal. More like bones grinding, popping, cracking in ways they shouldn't. Something tall but broken, bent at the waist, hanging awkwardly in front of the tent. Its shadow passed over the tent wall. Long arms, knees bending the wrong direction, shoulders hunched too high, head tilted to the side like it was listening. I held my breath so hard my vision blurred. The creature took one slow, careful step to the left, then another, then another. It circled the tent a second time, this time walking upright but jerking, twitching, dragging one of its legs like it still preferred using its hands. When it reached the back of the tent again, it dropped to the ground with a heavy thump. Then silence. No dragging, no breathing, no movement, nothing. I stayed frozen until the sky started to lighten. When morning finally came, I unzipped the tent as slowly as possible and stepped out. I nearly fell backward. The ground around my tent was covered in deep, freshly carved handprints, hundreds of them, long fingers. No knuckle marks, no footprints, just hands, circling the tent, crossing over each other, digging grooves into the dirt as if whatever walked on them weighed far more than a person should. But the worst part, there were 7 long trenches leading from the ridge to the tent, like it had dragged itself toward me 7 different times during the night, but only walked away once. All the trenches led toward my tent. Only one led away, and it stopped 20 feet from the trees. It just ended, like it had lifted off the ground, or climbed, or crawled upward. I left everything, tent, food, gear, and ran all the way back to the car. Never looked back, never returned for my stuff, never reported it. For weeks afterward, I woke up hearing that dragging sound. Shh, thump. Sometimes I'd find dirty handprints on my back porch in the mornings, sometimes on the windows, once on my car hood. They always face outward, like something standing there on its hands had watched me and then crawled away. There were 4 of us on that trip. Me, my girlfriend Emma, and our 2 friends, Mark and Lila. We'd all gone camping together countless times, usually at well-known parks with other campers nearby. But that summer we wanted something different, something quieter, more isolated, more real. So we picked an old forest preserve a few hours north. The place barely had any reviews online, just a few grainy photos and some mentions of primitive campsites and unmaintained trails. It sounded perfect. The drive there felt normal. The trail in was normal. Even the campsite we picked, a grassy clearing surrounded by tall oaks, seemed perfectly fine. We set up our tents in a loose row facing the fire pit, Mark and Lila, me and Emma's tent. Plenty of space, easy to see each other, nothing strange, if only it stayed that way. The first night felt harmless. We cooked dinner, sat by the fire, told dumb stories, and joked about how creepy the woods looked in the dark. Typical camping vibes. The woods were a bit quieter than we expected, but we didn't think too much of it. By midnight, we all called it a night. Emma fell asleep instantly. I lay awake for a while, listening to the wind in the trees. At around 3:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not from a sound, not from a nightmare, just the feeling that something was wrong. I rolled over in my sleeping bag and looked toward the wall of the tent. I could faintly see Mark and Lila's tent through the mesh. Except, it wasn't where it had been when I fell asleep. I blinked a few times, sitting up. Mark and Lila's tent was directly in front of ours, maybe 10 feet closer than before, almost aligned with our tent door. That didn't make sense. Before bed, there had been at least 30 feet between our tents. Had they moved it? In the middle of the night? Without making a sound, I nudged Emma awake. "Hey, look outside." Mark and Lila moved their tent. She sat up groggily, glanced through the mesh, and frowned. Why would they move it closer? I have no idea. Should we check? No, I whispered immediately. Let's wait until morning. Neither of us fell back asleep, but nothing else happened. In the morning, we stepped outside and walked over to Mark and Lila's tent. Before we even said anything, Mark came stumbling out looking confused and irritated. "Dude," he said, rubbing his eyes, "why the hell did you guys move your tent closer last night?" "What?" I said. "We didn't move anything." "We heard something dragging across the ground," Lila added, stepping out behind him. "It sounded like canvas scraping. We assumed you two were moving your tent." "We thought you moved yours," Emma said. We all looked around the campsite. Our tents were only about 8 feet apart. They had been 30 feet apart the night before. It made my skin crawl. We spent half the morning trying to rationalize it. Maybe we misremembered the distance. Maybe the ground sloped subtly. Maybe we set up wrong. None of it made real sense. Still, we brushed it off. We shouldn't have. We stayed another night. Biggest mistake of all. That evening, the forest felt different, colder, heavier, like the air didn't want us there. Around sunset, Lila pointed out something that made my stomach twist. All the trees surrounding our campsite leaned inward slightly. We hadn't noticed that the night before. It looked like the forest had grown around us, or folded inward, or watched. By midnight, everyone was a little on edge. We put the fire out and decided to turn in early. This time, I was too nervous to fall asleep right away. I lay awake, listening. Nothing but the faint rustling of leaves and the occasional creak of branches. Then at 2:17 a.m. I heard it, a soft dragging, fabric on dirt. Shh. I shot upright. The sound wasn't near us, it was between the two tents, like something was dragging them apart or closer or somewhere else entirely. I shook Emma awake. "Do you hear that?" She nodded immediately, eyes wide. We stayed perfectly still. The dragging grew louder, slower, more deliberate. Then it stopped. Right outside our tent door, I held my breath. A soft tapping sound followed. Tap, tap, tap. Not on our tent, on the ground. Like someone's fingertip was gently hitting the dirt. Then, the dragging started again, but this time it wasn't between the tents. It was behind us, near the tree line. Shh, shh. I unzipped the tent just an inch, enough to see outside, but not enough to be seen. What I saw made my entire body go cold. Our tent was now facing the wrong direction. Sometime during the night, it had turned, rotated about 40 degrees, like someone had lifted it and twisted it while we slept. I zipped it closed and whispered, "Emma, we have to get out of here at sunrise." She didn't argue. None of us slept another minute. But before the night was over, one more thing happened. At around 4:40 a.m., while the sky was just barely turning gray, Mark shouted, "Hey, who's out there?" Emma and I scrambled out of our tent. Mark was standing outside his with a flashlight, shaking, pointing toward the field beyond the trees. "What happened?" I asked. "I woke up because our tent was sliding," he said. "Not shaking, sliding, like someone was dragging it." Lila stepped out looking terrified. "And I heard something moving around it," she whispered. "What did it sound like?" Emma asked. Lila swallowed hard. "Hands." The four of us packed up in less than 10 minutes. It's throwing everything into bags without folding or sorting anything. We practically ran down the trail back to the parking lot. The whole way, I felt like the forest was pushing us out. The trees leaned inward. The wind made strange patterns. The path felt narrower than before. When we reached the parking lot, something made all of us turn back at the same time. Not a sound, not a movement, just instinct. All four of us swore we saw the same thing, a faint shape in the trees. Something tall, crouched low, hands pressed to the ground, watching. We didn't say goodbye, didn't talk on the drive home, didn't discuss it for months. But here's what finally broke me. 2 weeks later, while cleaning out the gear in my garage, I unfolded my tent. On the bottom, etched deep into the dirt stains, were long drag marks. Not from us, not from the ground, from hands, as if something had gotten underneath the tent while we slept and tried to pull it away. I've heard all kinds of sounds in the woods, owls, coyotes, branches snapping, even the occasional distant shout from another campsite. But until last year, I had never heard an emergency whistle in the middle of nowhere. And after what happened, I hope I never do again. It started as a casual fall camping trip with my older brother Daniel. We'd been camping together since we were kids, always picking remote spots far off the trail. This time, we chose a deep forest about 3 hours north, near a lake that wasn't even marked on most maps. When we got there, the place was silent. Not unsettling, just peaceful. The kind of quiet that feels calming, like the forest is asleep. We set up camp near the water, cooked dinner, and watched the sun go down behind the trees. By midnight, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air felt oddly crisp, too crisp. Daniel joked that it felt sterile, like the forest had been wiped clean. By 12:30 a.m., we were in our tents, exhausted from the long hike in. At 2:47 a.m., the whistle blew. Not faint, not distant, not muffled. A shrill, piercing emergency whistle was maybe 100 feet away. Daniel shot upright in his tent, and I did the same. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Yeah," he said immediately. "Someone's out there." We listened, waiting to hear it again. It came. Louder. 3 short blasts. The universal signal for help. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. I followed, scanning the trees. There was no moonlight. Everything was shadows and black silhouettes. Then a 4th whistle blast. This one sounded like it was right behind the cluster of pines near the lake. Daniel lowered his voice. "Someone's in trouble. We have to go check." "Wait," I said. "We didn't bring a whistle." He stopped. "I know." And there was no one else at the trailhead. No cars. He hesitated. Then the whistle blew again, this time broken, like someone blew too hard and the sound cracked. Daniel clenched his jaw. Someone might be injured. He started walking toward the tree line. I didn't want to go. Everything in my body told me to stay put. But Daniel wasn't the kind of person you let go alone. So I followed, clutching the flashlight so hard my hand trembled. We stepped into the pines. The air changed instantly. Colder, denser, wrong. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, but the beams felt dimmer than usual, like the dark was swallowing the light. "Hello?" Daniel called. "Are you hurt? Blow the whistle again." Silence. We kept walking. 10 feet, 15, 20. Then blast! A single whistle burst, exploded through the hollow night, right in front of us. Daniel spun the flashlight toward the sound. No one, just more trees. Then something else happened. A whistle came from behind us, then another from the left, then one from farther right. 4 whistle blasts, 4 directions. Impossible, unless there were multiple people. But the sounds weren't overlapping. They were perfectly spaced, perfectly timed, perfectly coordinated. Daniel's breathing shifted, shallow, uneven. "Something's wrong," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. Then the whistle blew again. This time, right next to my ear. I screamed and fell back, scrambling away from the sound. But Daniel didn't move. He didn't scream. He just stared forward, frozen. "Daniel," I whispered shakily, "what the hell was that?" He didn't answer, just kept staring. "Daniel?" He slowly raised the flashlight, and that's when I saw it. A shadowy shape standing between the pines. Tall, still, not fully human. Its outline looked wrong, limbs slightly too long, shoulders sloped strangely low, and in its hand, a small metallic object, a whistle, but not like ours. This one looked old, bent, covered in dried mud. It lifted the whistle to its mouth and blew, silently. No sound came out, but I felt air move past my face, like the sound existed, just not for us. The creature lowered the whistle, then it mimicked Daniel's voice. Perfectly. "Help me," it whispered. Daniel's knees buckled. The creature tilted its head in a jerky, unnatural motion, like it was studying our reactions. Then it blew into the whistle again. This time the sound echoed from somewhere else entirely, deep in the woods, far beyond sight. It wasn't a signal. It was a lure, a way to make people come looking. The creature took 1 step forward. The ground beneath it didn't crunch or shift. It didn't disturb a single leaf. Daniel snapped out of his trance, grabbed my arm, and yanked me backward. "Run!" We sprinted through the pines, stumbling over roots and rocks, the whistle blasts following us. One close, one far, one left, one right. Over and over, blah, blah, blast! My lungs burned, my legs screamed. My ears rang with every whistle burst. We didn't stop until we saw the glow of our campfire remnants. When we reached the tents, we threw everything into our packs and sprinted down the trail in near blackness. The whistle followed us the entire way. Always three blasts, always shifting locations, never stopping. At one point, we both heard a voice behind us, "Help me." But neither of us dared turn around. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. When we looked back into the darkness of the trail entrance, we saw it. A single shadow standing completely still, holding the whistle, slowly raising it, then blowing it toward us. No sound came out, but we heard the whistle echo. Behind us, right by the car. We dove inside and tore out of the parking lot. When we got home, Daniel and I agreed on one thing. Whatever that thing was, it didn't want help. It wanted us to come closer, and it almost succeeded.